Welcome back to another edition of the podcast, and tonight sees Rochdale return to the top of the National League after a late winner versus Southend United in the National League. And tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Worall from NL Full Time to react to tonight's fixture, because it was quite a significant fixture, I suppose, in the league, not just in terms of the title race that sees Rochdale return to the top, but also it sees Southend still remain outside of the playoffs. So, Rob, firstly, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing really well. Not too many games on tonight. I think there would have been a lot of focus on this one. I was planning to go and watch some National League South action. I was going to go to Enfield Town for the first time. It's only an hour or so from me, and watch their match against Dorking, but that was called off early. And then just while I was thinking about other ones, you got in touch and said, do you fancy watching the Dale Southend match and then doing a reaction? So, yeah, it'd be interesting. We've been messaging a bit through the evening, and I think we largely see things quite similarly, but we'll see. We'll see if we can find some differences. And more importantly, of course, get the viewers joining in, whether they're Rochdale fans on a high, Southend fans with that sinking feeling you get when you lose late on, other National League lovers,
York fans, Halifax fans.
Yeah, York fans. I know I've seen a message in the Absolute Football podcast group from Morgan Bruce, who straight away said, enjoy the EFL, Shah. It probably feels like that. I mean, we haven't covered the result yet, but it's big highs, big lows, something that the managers and the players are very good at levelling out, aren't they? Supporters, they find it a lot more difficult.
I think straight after a game as well as that immediate reaction, particularly for York supporters. York I think are doing all they can at the moment, and I don't want to make it about them because of course it's Rochdale's night, but they've still got that unbeaten streak. But for Rochdale tonight, we were both saying, weren't we, as the game were going on, that it's quite a dull game, and I think over the 90 minutes it was, but the significance, of the actual result is more important than, the actual performance. We're going to talk through the events of the game, but I think for Rochdale coming into this one, I was listening to the commentary and, they said that, they haven't particularly got a good record against Southend. They've always been tight games. I don't think particularly a game versus Southend for Rochdale is the sort of game where you're going to see the best of them. Like, I don't think the likes of, East, Devante Rodney, Alarakia who came on, Dees Ruwe who came on, you're going to see the best of them because, it's not the Southend, as we saw, came to not lose and to try catch them on the break. And they're a horrible side for anyone in the top 7 to play against. I know their record this season against top 7 sides hasn't been particularly great. However, what I will say on that is they've always been tight games, and I don't care what anyone says about the stats of those. Southend are a side for me that if they do manage to climb back into the playoffs come the end of the season, which is still in their hands, I can't imagine Rochdale wanting to face them. I felt they did very, very well tonight to, not slip up and get all 3 points because it was a very awkward game, I felt, for them.
Really, really difficult game for them to approach. Let me clear this one up because you've said it, I'm about to say it. We did find the match quite dull, but listen, let's take the emotion out of that. It was predictably dull because of the way that the two sides play. They have very good defences. They're hard to break down. But Southend's game plan, you could argue, certainly until the equaliser, which to be fair wasn't too long after Southend scored. But Southend's game plan was absolutely bang on, wasn't it? All the while it was level. And then when they got their moment, a bit of an unusual goal. But Southend are kind of efficient all round the pitch, and they rely on little moments, and they normally get their chaotic moments from the same player who's got such an appetite for goals. It's ridiculous. He hit 20 last season, didn't he? And he just wanted that. As that ball came over the top, he just wanted it more than any other striker, more than any defender. And he managed to get it in and give Southend a lead. At that point, their game plan was bob on. But Rochdale got level quickly. They scored a very good goal. And I think we all know how good Kyron Gordon's right foot is. We saw how good his left foot can be tonight as well. And then obviously, really the kind of reaction about the game is about the goals, because largely everything in between them was stalemate, wasn't it? Perhaps you can lead us on to what happened in the end. If anybody's watching this without having watched it or seen the score, tell them what happened late on.
Yeah, so of course, late in the game, Pritchard came on. Of course, it was quite ironic. He sent a message about, him scoring a late winner, I think against Solihull Moors a few weeks ago. Yeah, and once again tonight he came on and didn't score, but he created the goal. And for me, I don't know what your thoughts were, but the man of the match, I felt, particularly now he scored as well, Harvey Gilmore got the late winner. And, we speak, I know I keep repeating it, but we speak about not particularly being a pretty performance, but that's the sign of a side that can go on to win the title. We speak about York, and a lot of people are highly praising them at the moment, but they failed to beat Southend at home and away. Of course, Rochdale still have to play them away, but Rochdale, have beaten them. They're 2 points clear of York now with 2 games in hand, and there's nothing to suggest at the moment. I think on paper, a lot of people will still look at York with the strength in depth, but there's nothing. Rochdale are doing all the right things for me to win the league. I think last season, this Southend game, it'd be a game where potentially they might have, only picked up a point, potentially might have even lost. But this season, they've just got that bit of added quality and that never say die attitude to be able to break sides down in this one overall. We are going to come to the live chat anyway. We'll see what people have been saying. Someone's come in and said, after 26 games, Wrexham won 62 points. They're currently on 64. Could be looking at a record points total. We certainly could. And I think games like tonight suggest to me that potentially, because I don't think if Rochdale would have only got a point against Southend, it would have been the end of the world. I don't know what your thoughts were, yet they've still found a way to win. I felt like it were kind of dying out the game until that late moment, I felt.
Yeah, they were. Listen, they'd have been level on points with York, 2 games in hand. I think we've discussed on a couple of different pods now over the last few days, or myself and my colleagues have, that what looked ridiculously close as a title race less than 2 weeks ago with 1 or 2 points between 5 teams. Suddenly there's been a little bit of a break away from York and Rochdale. They've been playing these back-to-back midweek and Saturday games, and they've prevailed in all of them. They've pulled a little bit clear. And it would be difficult to put a strong argument for any team other than those 2 coming past them now, for the simple reason that it's unlikely that they'll both slip up from here, So most likely it's between the 2 teams like Boreham Wood and Scunthorpe and Carlisle, and maybe with one last fling if they can get some momentum going again, Forest Green. But no, I think we've both said that York are more free scoring, that's for sure. We also know that Rochdale have a better defence. York are a little bit more open the way they go about games. I think their games are probably a little bit more entertaining to watch, but Rochdale are very, very efficient. They have a wonderful from back to front, and they have an 18-year-old now keeper in Watmuff who's back between the sticks. And as I think Shah said on the pod on Monday night, he's got a little bit of arrogance about him for an 18-year-old as well. You're 18, aren't you? I mean,
yeah, I think he's younger than me, actually.
Yeah, can you even imagine, playing in sticks for Rochdale in games like this, let alone, Manchester City being your parent club?
No, it's ridiculous. And I think he's someone who's been highly praised over the whole course of the season as being one of the best goalkeepers in the league, not just in terms of, his saving ability, but also, the way, how good he is with his feet, passing out from the back. You can kind of tell, he's played at higher levels, specifically, Manchester City, and that he's been coached there. But just in terms of individuals, I suppose, for this fixture that stood out to you, Harvey Gilmore, as I've mentioned, will be man of the match, not just because of that goal. I thought throughout the whole game, his interceptions, his passing ability was brilliant. And, I don't think many Rochdale players, which sounds silly because they've won, actually particularly played to the best we've ever seen them because of the way Southend played. But Harvey Gilmore was someone who stood out on the pitch for me in this game.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, I went off track. I was going to come on to him. Listen, we often form our opinions heavily on the 2 or 3 games that we see the other teams in the National League. Now, my only in the flesh this season sighting of Rochdale, they were tired. They lacked their usual energy against Aldershot when I went up there. We were on a terrible run at the time. We actually played really, really well. We were really unlucky not to score and not to come away with something. But Harvey Gilmore was the difference on that day. His appetite to get in the 6-yard box and turn a drag back over the line is what was the difference between the two teams then. He's an absolute bundle of energy, and he's not the only one, of course, in the middle of midfield there. Ryan East and Berger as well give Rochdale some real young legs there in the middle in the middle of the park. But yeah, I think it was quite fitting that Gilmore got the winning goal. And ironically for you, I'll steer us just for a moment towards your side. The winning goal, held up by Dias Aruwe, an ex-Halifax player, then to Pritch, who came on to good effect last week, and then the ball inside to Gilmore to get the winner. So two of those three players that you're familiar with, and they did themselves a favour and they did your team a favour tonight as well.
Yeah, they certainly did. Of course, just on the Southend side of things now, they still remain outside of the playoffs because of tonight. It's still very much in their hands to get back into the playoffs. 2 games in hand on Halifax. But if you look at those games, they are against Boreham Wood and Rochdale as well. Of course, 2 tough fixtures, and they haven't got a good record against the top 7. But I think as a Southend fan, what would give you hope that those 2 fixtures are at home. If I'm being honest tonight, I thought the game plan for them worked very well. I thought they did I thought they played particularly well. I don't think Rochdale really created many opportunities. I don't think there were many times where I felt that they were going to go on and score. But something that sides that are in the title race do is they're clinical, and that was the case tonight again. Once again, they went 1-0 down. I felt after that, right, it's going to be a really frustrating game now. It still was, but it could easily, finish 1-0 Southend because of this. Them getting that first goal is so hard to break down. Boom, instantly. It did take a wonder goal, but, they found an equaliser very quickly. And even in the second half, it was a very dull game. Nothing was really happening. But they found a way to win. And for me, that's the sign of a very good side. But just on Southend overall, I don't think it was a bad performance. And I think there's a lot of positives they can take. And like I've said, it's still very much in their hands to finish in the playoffs. I just find it very strange that, you look at the record against the top 7 this season. They haven't beaten any of them, bar Halifax, who, they could overtake still. The way Southend play, and historically as well, they have a good record against the better sides. And they're just losing games, aren't they? Like tonight, like the Scunthorpe game, like the Forest Green game. They're just not picking up results. Do you think it's a case of being a little bit unfortunate, or?
I think they are exactly where they should be in the table, Southend. And I don't necessarily mean specifically 8th. I mean 6th, 7th, 8th. Mm-hmm. I think they play a certain way. They are very hard to beat. Mm-hmm. Let's be clear about that. And by the way, tonight, I agree, their game plan was pretty much on track. I mentioned that it was for a while. And there should be no onus on them to go and try and play Rochdale off the park. They're going away to the side virtually top and could go top with a win. And a point, coming back with a point tonight would have been very solid point for Southend. I just don't think they play a very efficient way, don't they? And there's not too much chaos amongst that, other than perhaps Gus Scott Morris, who's obviously got that appetite and got that freedom to just drift out of position and drift into crucial spaces to good effect. But they will be fine. Interestingly, a few weeks ago, I'm going to say 4 or 5 weeks ago, there was a much bigger gap, wasn't there? And we almost thought the top 7 were almost locked in. But then Southend have slowed down a little bit. The likes of Halifax and Solihull, and to a certain extent Hartlepool, have been in pretty reasonable form. And so it's all closed. What I would say is, if you said, okay, standing start from now, I'm not looking at the table in front of me, but I feel like I know it pretty well. So Halifax, Southend, Solihull and Hartlepool, straight race from now to the end of the season to finish 7th. I'm still going to back Southend to win that. And I'll be honest with you, my second team that I think could get there based on their form, their momentum, their manager, something's just clicked, and that's Solihull Moors. Yeah, I'd probably just shade Southend over Solihull, then your side Halifax, and then Hartlepool. But we've seen so many times in football that a week can change everything. You know, you could get 1 point out of 9 or 9 out of 9, and the world can look very different, can't it?
Yeah, it certainly can. You know, we mentioned it with it. It felt like the top 7 were locked in, and now it is open. But you make a very good point there about, you know, if you had those 4 sides, yeah, I'd still back Southend to finish in the playoffs. If we were all starting on 0 points and it were a full season, I'd back Southend to finish above those 4 sides. But maybe from Southend's perspective, it's a situation they've not been in before in the National League. Is the fact that, you know, they've always been the chasers, not just last season where they actually managed to finish in the playoffs, but the season before they chased and they almost got in. This season, do you feel like it's a bit of a difficult and awkward situation, you know, them actually being the side that other teams are chasing, and potentially that's a reason why, you know, your Halifaxers are back in it now, because, you know, Halifax have been on brilliant form recently. I think they've had like 1 defeat in 10, which is ridiculous. Solihull Moors, I totally agree with what you're saying under Millington. You know, he's got previous experience actually at Halifax of getting his side in the playoffs. You know, those two now are actually on, you know, Southend's tail, and I don't want to be too negative on them because I thought they did the job pretty well tonight. But, you know, it's a results business, isn't it? Dropping points at Boston, dropping points at Rochdale, well, losing at Rochdale. Your games in hand now are against, you know, Boreham Wood and Rochdale once again. You look, compare that to Halifax's run. I think we've got, no disrespect, I know you're on here, but Truro, on paper, you look at Aldershot sitting 20 if you see that as a winnable game. And I think Brackley as well. It's still 3 tough fixtures, but there's a potential for them to pick up maximum points, and I don't think people would be surprised.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I'll take that on the chin. I like it. I'd like all teams to underestimate Aldershot when they play them.
I think just from an outside perspective, the sitting 20th, that's how I'd say.
Yeah, and they concede a lot of goals. We've had a little chat tonight about it.
Yeah.
The two sides meet at the EBB, don't they? A week on Saturday, and you know, we've had a lot of tight games, which Aldershot were shading, and then Halifax have prevailed a bit of late. And then we had an absolute humdinger there last year, didn't we? Where there's 7 goals in it, and Halifax managed to win it 4-3. But coming back to Southend, I remember strongly last year, there was right up until the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season, there was a section of the Shrimpers fan base that still wanted Kev Mayer out. He wasn't good enough, but they timed it very well, and they got in, they nipped in the last week or two, didn't they? Maybe it was even on the last day at Gateshead or so. Or I can't. No, the Gateshead game was just a bit before the end of the season, wasn't it? But they got there on merit at the end of the day, and then this one redeeming factor that you and I both feel very strongly about with Southend. If they get to the playoffs, and no matter whether they finish 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, they're not a side you want to draw. They're very hard to beat, and they got through to the final last year. They led the final twice, I think, last year, and they'll have that bit between their teeth. They'll be in familiar territory if they get there again. And I've already said, and I think you've already said, regardless of finishing positions, if Southend are in the playoffs, we're backing them to win them, aren't we?
Yeah, them, and I think at the moment, just the way they play, and I think a lot of people from the outside, if they don't watch Southend, will say, look at the record against the top 7. You know, you'd think they'd crash out first round, but the way they play, they make it very difficult for sides. And it's such a huge win for Rochdale tonight, not just because that where Southend are, but that was a really difficult game. I think that'll be Southend's toughest game. And it might sound silly when they're sitting 8th, but I genuinely do, because they're such a horrible side to play against, particularly, you know, when you're at home, and, you know, they've got the job done. It was ugly, but they found a way to win. And yeah, I think Southend, for me, I think anyone inside the top 7, I'd want to avoid them in the playoffs. I think Rochdale tonight, I think their fans, they may disagree with me, but if I was a Rochdale fan and we didn't end up winning the league, which, you know, at the moment, you would have them as favourites on paper. But if they didn't end up winning the league, I would not want to face Southend in the playoffs. That'd be the one side I would not want to face. Well, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, I agree with that. And my only caveat to Southend winning the playoffs is if Rochdale go on and win the league, I might struggle to back Southend to beat York in the playoffs. Do you know what I mean? I feel if you said to me, just Rob, doesn't matter whether it's playoffs or title, you've got X amount of money, you've got to put it on it at evens, a team that's going to be in the EFL next season. And for me, that feeling I have is for York.
Feels like it's their time, but
yeah, I really want a tight title race, as a neutral in terms of those clubs. I personally would love to see Rochdale prevail. I just think listen, I'm saying nothing negative about York at all, but I just like Rochdale as a football club. I like it when I go up there and commentate on the games and I sign in and they give you, not like everybody else, just a lanyard. They give you a lanyard and they give you a program and they usually give you a voucher for a pie. And it's a proper football club, and it's had a lot of lean years. And of course, York City fans will say quite rightly that their club's had a lot of lean years as well. They may be the two that prevail, but I think if Rochdale win the league, York probably win the playoffs. And if York win the league, could be go again next season for Rochdale, because like you, I would back Southend.
We'll come to the live chat quickly. There's one final big question I do want to ask you. You probably can kind of guess what it will be. But we'll come to the live chat and then we'll kind of close things up. Someone said, I hate Southend. Sometimes no attack. Don't try anything. All just boring, passing to side. England football under Southgate was far more enjoyable. Poor subs. Hopper needs to go. I think when you look at Southend, for me, Hopper coming on, I wouldn't particularly blame him. I think they're actually a better side than what they were last season. And I think you can't underestimate, Rochdale. I think on another day, it could have gone either way, that game, to be fair. I felt that, it was probably going to fizzle out for a draw, and that'd be a very good draw. But yeah, it's frustrating for Southend, but I wouldn't be too down after that. I'd be more down when they're slipping up to sides towards the bottom. It was really fine margins tonight. We've also had Chris, who's mentioned Oliver Watmuth. He said, we love Oliver Watmuth. He's also said Ryan East and Harvey Gilmore in the best midfield partnership in the National League. Would you agree with that?
It'd be difficult to find a better pairing than that, wouldn't it? And the thing is, what Rochdale have as well, another little weapon that they have, they've got good depth all around the pitch now, more so than they had last season. They're able to bring on 3-4 players, 5 if they want, that will not weaken their team. They will freshen it up. It's exactly what happened in the last 25, 30 minutes when they played my side. There was nothing in the game, but they were able to reach for 3 or 4 quality players to come on. And we weren't. I mean, we've had our injury issues like lots of clubs have, but that was the fundamental difference that day. And maybe it was again tonight, and maybe it was last midweek against Solihull. And all these things add up, these little factors. It's not necessarily a coincidence that Rochdale have won the game at Solihull late and won the game against Southend late, because they got good strength on the bench. And when I say the bench, I don't just mean the players. I mean the management team. Jim McNulty has a much stronger management team around him this season than he had last season. I know they brought in a couple of strong coaches, and so far it's all adding up. And it was nice to see the new pitch. Thought it played pretty well, didn't it? Looked pretty well.
Yeah, that's something good. Yes, exactly. I thought it did. And that could be a massive positive to Rochdale. We said throughout the season, throughout the first half, I've said it and Paul said it. We've always said that will be their downfall if they don't get it sorted. And now they've got it sorted. They're in the best position, I think, to be able to go on to win this league. And like we said, results like tonight, if they keep going, although York are on brilliant form, it's one defeat in 17 for them. If Rochdale keep winning, then York won't be able to catch them. It is in Rochdale's hands. We have got a new channel member though, so a massive thank you to Tech God YT, I believe that is. Thank you very much for becoming a channel member. I do genuinely appreciate that. Let me know who you support, and I'll make sure that the badge is used, your club badge for the emojis in the live chat too. We've also had, coming in tonight, we've also had Tom, who's a Solihull fan, I believe. He said, Mayer is probably one of the few top managers at this level. The big letdown for Southend has been facing playoff teams. I think What it always has been with Southend, and I don't think it's an issue as long as they finish in the playoffs this season, is that they don't lose many games at all. They're hard to beat, but they don't finish sides off. And this isn't really in terms of this Rochdale game. It's in terms of like the Boston game. They're not finishing sides off towards the bottom. They've been a lot better at it this season, but they're not. They're not going on a long winning streak. They draw too many games for me, and that could be what the downfall is at come the end of the season. And then we've had a York City fan who's coming. York City got much more balance and poise about them this year, far more pragmatic than under Hinchelwood. Even if they don't win the league, which I think they will, I think they'll be fine in the playoffs. Yeah, I've got a lot of confidence. If York weren't to win the league, which for some reason I still think they will, if they were to, like you, Rob, I would fancy them in the playoffs. I just think they'd have too much quality come the end of it. But yeah, we could see a record-breaking season. And I'm going to ask you it, Rob. I've just kind of answered it there. Who are you after tonight? And it's kind of a question I just keep kind of repeating at the moment. Who do you fancy to win the league after tonight? Would you still be back in York, or back in York, I should say, or would you be going towards Rochdale now?
No, I don't. I wouldn't change my mind on the back of one result. Personally, I picked York at the start of the season. I don't mind admitting I'd like Rochdale to win. I'd like them to win the league, but no, I still think York have got a little bit more. I think they've got a really dependable and consistent forward line. Rochdale have got a decent one. Obviously, Disarue's been out for a while. He might take a little while to get back to his top level. And obviously Henderson, 41 years old, but he's been in decent form, hasn't he? They've had one or two changes up there. I just think there's goals every week at York. And it might come down to who can find their way to finish off games in the tight games. And Rochdale have proven over this last week that they can do it, and they have done it. And, like you get on the cricket when you watch it these days, you get this predictor, and it swings percentages and stuff like that. I'd be the first to admit that tonight, with Rochdale winning a tight game against a good playoff chasing side, late on, 3 more points, going top of York, with 2 games in hand, the predictor bar has swung a little bit, hasn't it? It's swung a little bit back more towards Rochdale. But for me, it was swinging from kind of 55, 60% York, now to maybe 45, 50, 55%. Do you know what I mean? So this is going to go on and on. What we got 17, 18, 19 games left, in Rochdale's case. It might even still be 20. Is it 19, 20 games? So long way to go. And maybe just my advanced years and all the years I've watched football and called football teach me a little bit more not to get too much on one result and too much the other way. But no, I picked York at the start of the season. I think all of us on NL full time. So that's me, Joe, who just posted in, and Christian as well. I can't remember if Dickie predicted this year, but all 3 of us did pick York before.
Joe, that blooming neck. I thought you were a York fan. I've just realised.
Yeah, off the line blog, Joe. That's
it. Yeah.
I will say this though, and I don't want to sound too smug about it, but it's going to sound smug. I picked York to finish first and Rochdale second before a ball was kicked.
I'm trying to think what I had. I think I had York top. I feel like I had Rochdale second. I'm not just saying that either. You can go back, and I think I had Carlisle third. I think that were my top 3.
Oh, just message Paul Franklin. He'll tell me different, I'm sure.
Okay. No, I'm being genuine. I reckon that was my prediction. I definitely had York to win the league, and I'm still backing them too. But I think at the moment, if you're looking at the stat side of things, you'd definitely say in terms of results at the moment, Rochdale are on track. But we know how quickly it can change, as we saw with this playoff race. Everyone was saying it's locked in the top 7. Now it's wide open again. But no, we're probably at a point now where we will bring things to a close. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in tonight. Please remember to like and subscribe. It genuinely does go a long way if you can do that. Rob, as always, thank you very much for joining me tonight to review this fixture.
Yeah, brilliant. Enjoyed it. Enjoying the title race, enjoying the promotion race. And dare I say, obviously got one eye on the relegation fight as well. And hopefully my side can finish the right one in that. Thanks for having me on.
Brilliant. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in, and we will see you on Thursday. Bye for now.